This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host.
I'm Arlen Specter, sitting in for Terry Madonna on Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Today our focus will be on Pennsylvania's highways, bridges, rail systems, with a look at how we're to finance these important items. Covering Pennsylvania's 67 counties, I have heard much about people's discontent with sitting in long traffic jams on the Schuylkill Expressway or I-80, or not having adequate transportation through the Mon Valley, or difficulties in rail commutes. So we're going to be looking to find out what are the answers or solutions to some of these important problems. We have a distinguished panel, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Transportation, Alan Biehler, the Pennsylvania State Treasurer, Robin Wiessmann, and the Vice President of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, Gene Carr. With the decision by the United States Department of Transportation to reject the Pennsylvania plan to toll I-80, we now are looking for alternative ways to subsidize the $1 billion a year Pennsylvania shortfall. One subject which is almost forbidden is the subject of taxes. Certainly subject we don't like to talk about in Washington, a subject the Pennsylvania legislature doesn't like to talk about in taxes, but with serious concerns about the governor's plan to lease the Pennsylvania Turnpike to a private entity for a price of about $12.8 billion to produce about $1 billion a year in revenue, with objections there, and a short legislative session, there's going to be a scramble to find revenue on the spot. So let me put the question to the Secretary of Transportation, Alan Biehler. The Pennsylvania Truckers Association, or the American Truckers Association, has said they would be willing to pay 25 cents more per gallon on taxes to improve the highways, and they think it would be productive and cost efficient and would pay the truckers to do that. What are the prospects, Mr. Secretary, for a tax increase by the Pennsylvania legislature?
Senator, first of all, let me say thanks for helping us just very recently restore the Highway Trust Fund to solvency, first of all, because that was a very important first step. But to your
Secretary Biehler is referring to the $8 billion shortfall in the Pennsylvania, in the United States Highway Trust Fund, caused by motorists doing less driving and less taxing revenue. So there's one bailout where we'll help you, Alan.
Well, we appreciate it. What's $8 billion among friends? But to your question, it's correct. The rejection of the application to toll Interstate 80 really does produce a significant hole, to the tune of, in a couple of years, $500 million a year approximately. You asked to react to the Trucking Association's proposal on a national level to increase gasoline taxes by 25 cents per gallon. You know, when people think of that, it really sends them reeling. And I know that 2 years ago, when we talked to the governor about leading up to what was then passed in 2007, his first reaction to any kind of proposal of gas tax wasn't that he was necessarily against it, but he just said, I just can't imagine that members of the state legislature would support it.
Let's turn to the business community. You're the Vice President of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, Gene Carr. What would the response be to potential tax increase? Would the Chamber factor in efficiencies and productivities if the highways were better and you didn't have these long waits on I-80 or the Schuylkill Expressway or highways all around the state? What would you think about a tax increase?
That's a great question. I think the answer we give people often surprises them because, of course, we have serious concerns over Pennsylvania's tax structure. But this is a case where we actually support reasonable motor fuel tax increases because we believe that they're user fees and people see the immediate reaction from them putting money into the infrastructure. And we, in our view, have got to address that. We've got to address it for a number of reasons, for productivity reasons, for family, for the value of family life, to try and reduce commutes. For all these things, we believe it's important to put more dollars in. And as Secretary Biehler said, now that the IAD tolling is out, we've got to come up with a plan that's going to put more money in. And if not taxes, we've got to find out what that is.
When we come back very briefly, we'll turn to the Pennsylvania State Treasurer and ask her about the legislative proposals now pending in Congress for an infrastructure bank to produce up to, say, $180 billion for highways, bridges, and mass transit. We'll be right back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
In searching for ways to finance the nation's highways, bridges, and mass transit, legislation is pending in the Congress for a national infrastructure bank with a proposal for some $60 billion in tax credits, which has a leveraging factor of 3 to 1 to produce as much as $180 billion in tax credits. We turn now to Robin Wiessmann, Pennsylvania's treasurer. What would you think of a proposal like that, Madam Treasurer?
Well, in addition to the challenges that Pennsylvania faces with its infrastructure, the American Society of Civil Engineers rated America's infrastructure as a D. So it's fair to say I think it would be a wonderful proposal and something that's very, very needed for America's infrastructure today.
Let us turn now to this question of rails and mass transit before taking a look at the issues about our crumbling highways and our dilapidating bridges. There are many proposals pending around Pennsylvania, which I've been working on for a couple of decades now for mass transit. We have, for example, a proposal for the Schuylkill Metro, which would take pressure off of the Schuylkill Expressway, run from Center City, Philadelphia, to Reading, where through the Appropriations Committee I've taken the lead in getting some $22 billion already. We have proposals for maglev, a high-speed line, ultimately to go from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh in 2 hours and 7 minutes with intermediate stops all across the state, and a pilot project to go from Greensburg to the Pittsburgh International Airport, where we've gotten preliminary funding in excess of $20 billion, with the grave concern about global warming and the high price of gasoline and interest in taking cars off the highway and eliminating congestion. Let me turn to Secretary Biehler with the question of how would you evaluate putting significant resources away from highways and bridges into rails and mass transit?
I'm a huge advocate of doing just that. We simply cannot keep up with the demand on our highways, and from my way of thinking, we shouldn't because of the things you just mentioned. When you've got climate change threats, when you've got energy security issues, we've got to attract people to mass transit, not only local mass transit within urban areas, but the important connections, the intercity kind of rail systems that you've mentioned. Certainly the proposal for a Scranton to New York City line that you've been a big proponent of is a good example.
Well, there's an idea which we've gotten substantial spade money on, which would go from Scranton to Hoboken, right across the river.
Right.
And the thought is to have a Wall Street West. Wall Street has shown signs of wanting to diversify for security reasons, God forbid another terrorist attack, or how much more pleasant it is to live in northeastern Pennsylvania than in crowded New York City. Just a little commercial plug.
Sure.
Mr. Barr, let me turn to you on the question of economic development. The Chamber has a significant drive toward job development, economic development. What would it be like if we could attract a Wall Street West to northeastern Pennsylvania?
Well, certainly, Senator, we're in favor of whatever jobs we can get here in Pennsylvania. Certainly good, high-paying jobs are always in demand, and we would certainly favor that. We have a lot of things we have to do, infrastructure being part of that in order to do that. And as you were talking about mass transit, our members are keenly interested in that. We want to look at it from two perspectives. One, let's make sure that the transit systems are set up to carry people where they need to. More importantly, we have people who tremendously rely on that. One of our members who has 2 facilities in Philadelphia, upwards of 50% of their employees utilize mass transit to get back and forth to work. So they look at it from an employer perspective, getting people there. So all those are critical, and obviously attracting good, high-quality jobs to Pennsylvania is keenly important to us.
Madam Treasurer, you've had a concern about the ratio. It used to be 80-20. It's been reduced to 60-40, 60 federal, 40 state and local. The highway system years ago was 90-10. We're going to have another break here. They come a little too frequently for me, but I'm new at this job. And when we come back shortly, we'll turn to you for the answer to that important question.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
A key question which we debate in the Congress repeatedly is what should be the federal-state share. And Senator Dole made some very profound comments years ago when we had revenue sharing and it was eliminated. He said, I'm all for revenue sharing. This is what Senator Dole said, all for revenue sharing, except there's no more revenue to share. Well, State Treasurer Robin Wiessmann has some ideas that the federal government ought to pick up a little more of the tab. How about that, Madam Treasurer?
I think the federal government has the capacity to help jumpstart a lot of these projects. The responsibility, ultimately, a large part of it will, of course, rest with the states, but either through the Federal Infrastructure Bank Act or through providing greater liquidity and credit facilities for states and municipalities, they will have the opportunity to get going on these urgent, pressing infrastructure needs.
Let's turn now to the projects, only some of the projects around the state. And we've prepared a chart which I'd like to be put on the screen, which really shows the entire state. Starts off with the Mon Valley Expressway in southwestern Pennsylvania, goes to I-81 in the northeast, Route 22 in the Lehigh Valley, central Pennsylvania, the Susquehanna Valley Thruway, in southeastern Pennsylvania, the 422 River Crossing, could add in there the Schuylkill Expressway, and in the area, the Peach Street I-90 interchange. And now that totals up to in excess of $8 billion. Mr. Secretary, taking a look at that, it almost is discouraging, but I know you and I don't discourage easily. In fact, not at all. How do you approach those requirements on a statewide basis, which only represent some of the issues your department faces?
I would add to that we have something in the neighborhood of around $14 billion of highway and bridge needs on existing systems that need to simply be repaired. And so you can see now, shifting our attention to trying to find $8 billion on top of that, how frustrating it is. We've got to establish either a different appetite, which means we should either stop thinking about those kinds of dreams or take the harder look and face those issues square in the eye and find some kind of thoughtful financing sources that people will accept to deliver those kinds of realities.
Mr. Barr, turn to you, Chamber of Commerce representative, vice president, in terms of cost effectiveness. If we were to spend the money for those lines, or focus, for example, on the high-speed line, a maglev, with a projection to go from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh in 2 hours and 7 minutes, with intermediate stops in Lancaster and Harrisburg and Altoona and Johnstown and Greensburg. Very expensive. Right now we're competing for $45 billion on federal funds from the Greensburg to the Pittsburgh airport, which is a focus for southwestern Pennsylvania. But if we were to turn that, what would your view be of the impact on the jobs created to construct it and the revenue added to communities like Lancaster and Harrisburg and Altoona?
Certainly we know these projects create significant amounts of jobs. They drive jobs there. They drive creation to that site. As Secretary Biehler said, it's difficult with the number of needs we have trying to allocate those resources. And it almost strikes us that some type of ongoing dialogue with the business community, state, local, federal governments, with your position on Transportation Subcommittee on approach, you're in a unique position to help facilitate those kinds of things, to find out what are the best projects for Pennsylvania to assist the residents and to drive economic development and employment here in the Commonwealth. Those are not easy answers, but they're things, as you point out, we can't be discouraged by those numbers. We've got to sit down, take a look at those, and try and find out the best answers to those questions.
Well, you put your finger on a key spot. My position on the Appropriations Committee, and specifically on the subcommittee on transportation, I think it would be very useful if the business community could develop a projection, or if the state could develop a projection as to how much it would mean in terms of economic review. I have a sense that it would be enormously cost effective, that it would produce many dollars in return for Pennsylvania or the United States for expenditures or for taxes. It would swell the bank accounts of our Pennsylvania State Treasurer. It's a new job for me anchoring this show, but I'm told we have another timeout for a commercial. We'll be right back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business, with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
A key factor in our decisions in the Congress involve the safety factor. There have been reports that there are 6,000 structurally defective bridges in Pennsylvania. We know recently about the bridge collapse in Minneapolis. The question is, are these structurally defective bridges unsafe, Mr. Secretary?
We inspect these bridges on average at least once every 2 years, if not once every single year, depending on their condition. We will never knowingly allow a bridge to be unsafe. We will first restrict it.
Wait a minute. Knowingly is different from it's happening.
Right. Well, in fact, we had, as you know, we had a crack in a pier under the Interstate 95, unfortunately, in March of this year. So that was a case where a crack developed faster than we anticipated. But we discovered that.
But if not unsafe, a very, very serious problem which needs immediate attention?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I wish we were the only state with a problem and we could then attract all the federal money possible. But we do have, unfortunately, 6,000 structurally deficient bridges. We are aggressively going after those bridges. But what that means is we're able to the next year, probably reduce that number to 5,600. So it's just a basic start on that list.
Okay, that's still too many.
Exactly.
Well, let's turn in the few minutes we have left to the subject of the overall needs of the Pennsylvania Department of Highways on the infrastructure needs. So we're going to put up a chart here which shows that just to have a maintenance in their present condition, it's about $1 billion. To make some changes would take another $1.5 billion, and to do the job necessary for expansion and long-term projection of our commercial and economic needs would be in excess of $2 billion. So you come to $4.5 billion. As we look at this in the future, and again we come back to you, Mr. Secretary, as head man on the Department of Transportation, what can we tell Pennsylvanians that we are capable of doing to tackle this tremendous problem?
A year ago, we sought, as you said, just the bare minimum of $1 billion roughly to take care of the problem. We were successful in having the legislature approve about half of that. The most recent rejection of I-80 means that we're going to be down to around $200 million with that situation. So we're way behind revenue-wise. I think we've got to face the issue squarely and find additional revenue to make just the very basic needs of the system.
And looking to funding, let me take up quickly a couple of other subjects. And one is congestion financing, which they have used in London, and Mayor Bloomberg has proposed in New York City to have a user fee when people come into town. Well, Mr. Secretary, they've just put up the sign on 1 minute, so can you give us a fast answer to how you'd approach a user fee on congestion financing?
I will simply point out that in London's case, they have used an entry fee to help strengthen their transit system. People have talked about doing tolling on highways to finance new improvements. If we had a congestion fee, do you think we'd cut down on the traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway? I think you would, and you could also have a pot of money to deal with transit.
Do you think that could be really significant in handling some of our financial problems?
I think it can be, yes.
And so far, the reports from London and New York have been very favorable. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Thank you, Alan Biehler, Secretary of Transportation. Thank you, Robin Wiessmann, Pennsylvania State Treasurer. And thank you, Mr. Barr.